Now this concerns you because as military members, maybe not here deployed, but when we go back home, especially when we first get home, we do funeral details. We go out and we go around the local neighborhood and local cities, and we honor fallen veterans of war and that served in the military, and we help them by giving our respects and presenting them with the flag and playing taps and the whole 9 yards that comes along with the military funeral. And we are honored to do this. However, the Westboro Baptist Church and other and groups that support them come up to these churches or these funerals, and they picket in and around these churches and funeral sites. So that means for you, when you're out there at a funeral, they could very well possibly be out there picketing against a fallen soldier. And I'm sure some of you might have experienced this already. Some of you have had funeral details, and I know for a fact that one of our guys, Williamson, talked to me about it, and he did encounter this. They couldn't do anything about it, and they just carried on with theirs, and they had to hold their composure. And I know some of you might hate these guys and have extreme feelings of hate toward this church, and you can imagine how that must be to actually be there and not be able to do anything about it. Now, what we are told to do as U.S. Soldiers is to contact authorities and don't take any measures to get them off the ground. But like I said, it's really hard to do knowing that somebody that has died, that's previously served in the military, or even been at war to let us be free at where we're at now, has died. So what ends up happening is you have to do nothing, and you can't do anything. But steps have been taken to alleviate your desire to do this. What has happened is a Michigan Republican representative, Mike Rogers, according to ABCnews.com, and an interview by Adrian Mann Lewin on March 15, 2006, he said that American families burying their husbands or wives and sons and daughters who died while fighting for their nation are being subject to horrible verbal and visual attacks. No grieving family should be faced with such disrespect or threats and intimidation. And he signed legislation and put legislation up to the government to make bans on these protests. And according to GovTrackUS.gov, President Bush signed the Respect for America's Fallen Heroes Act on May 29, 2006. This act amends Titles 38 and 18 U.S. Code to prohibit certain demonstrations at ceremonies under the control of National Cemetery Administration and the Arlington National Cemetery. The Respect for Fallen Heroes Act, it prevents demonstrations being held at national funeral sites from an hour before the beginning of the ceremony to an hour after. So it covers a good span of time that the ceremony is going to be taking place. And what happens is these people can't protest 300 feet from the national funeral sites. But as you guys may or may not know, there's more than just national funeral sites out there. There's also just the small funeral sites that fallen soldiers are buried at. And what ends up happening is these protesters can still go to these small ones. And as you're on funeral can actually go to these small funerals, and you can be called to do these small funerals or these funerals at local grave sites instead of national ones. So there's still a possibility that they might be out there. Now states have tried, they've been setting acts to take against the protesters, but there's always loopholes, and they're still going to be out there. They can still be 300 feet down the block of a national cemetery, and depending on what state they're in, they can be really close to the funeral still. So they're still out there, and it's their right because we protect it, and as soldiers we protect them with the First Amendment. We protect that First Amendment, the right, the freedom of speech, and the freedom of assembly. Now, also somebody that's helped with this is the Patriot Guard Riders.